All right. Well, welcome. Welcome to our first ever webinar at One More Child. And I can tell you that I am so excited that I get to be here with you. I want you to know that I have prayed over each one of you before this webinar has actually happened. And I know I don't know you by name, but God hears our prayers and He knows who you are and what you're going through right now. So welcome again to the Thrive webinar at One More Child. I want to kind of tell you first a little bit about myself and then kind of get to you what we are trying to do through this webinar series. So my name is Kristen Hitchcock, and I am the Executive Director of Single Moms here at One More Child. And we are doing whatever it is we can do to help moms thrive in the life that God has given them. And that doesn't just include single moms, but that includes any mom. You know, right here, we're focusing on single moms, but my heart beats for every one of my sisters, which is each one of you out there. And so I want to tell you that One More Child and the Florida Baptist Children's Home has been around since 1904. And our focus has been helping children and families come to know Christ and to provide them with the services that through Jesus we can do here. Here we believe that mothers are a vital part of the family unit. And I know that if you're like me, no matter if you're single or married or, you know, going through different things, as a mother, life's hard. Life can be really, really hard. But what I want to do is I want to show you and help you to grow in the abundant life that we were given. Because when Jesus came for us, He didn't come just so that we could live in this world, but He says He came that we might have abundant life. And so that's where we are going in this series. I want to first go over a couple of the rules for this webinar. And so right now, when I'll be talking, I'd love for you to have that discussion time with us and interact with us. And so feel free to ask questions to one of our team members that is on this with me. Her name is Brittany Merville, and she will be here answering all of your questions. And so then if she can't respond, at the end we'll have a Q&A time, and in that time it's a chat feature. You can either talk to me or you can send other questions, and we will try to get back to as many as we can. And if we don't get to it during the webinar, we will also continue responding after the webinar is over. So that kind of brings me into now how we are going to thrive. And one of the things that I just want to tell you is that it is hard to thrive, but no matter what, as moms, whether we have one child or 18 children, I'm hoping that we're closer to the one child, but we all have the ability to thrive in this world, to bear fruit. And that's really what Jesus is telling us. When we thrive, we're bearing fruit. And so what I want to kind of get to is that this first one is that we can thrive no matter what we're dealing with, no matter what the circumstances, no matter what loss we're going through. So to tell you, you know, that I know that we can do this, I'm going to bring you to a place in my life where I've had to thrive through the loss. And so let's just, you know, kind of get to it. You know, as a mom of 4 children, you know, when God told me I was going to have one child, then, you know, that was awesome, because for a long time I didn't think I really wanted any children. And then being blessed with twins after that. And then Him saying in December of 2010, you know, you were blessed with another gift. And He gave me the gift of our 4th child, which was Hayden Emmanuel. And when He told us this, He said, you know, his name is to be Emmanuel because he is that reminder that God is always with you. And He was telling me, you know, what a gift that was. So in January of 2015, we had just been at a place in our life, our family, it was going really well. And then on January the 4th, of 2015. Life changed for us in a huge way. And that was happening because on that day, I experienced a loss that nobody wants to go through, but a lot of us feel. And it was the loss of my son. He was in a bad accident. And I can just remember going through that, walking into the hospital room, the nurses with that panic face on when they said, you know, who are you here to see? And when I told them, they said, oh, I'm sorry, you can't go back there. They're trying to work on him. And I dropped to my knees, and on my knees, all I can pray at that time was Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And I can remember, you know, as I'm breathing the life of Jesus out of me, there's a woman over top of me putting her hands on me that I'll never know. I just know that God brought her to me, and she's breathing Jesus into me at that same time. You know, and that might be my loss, you know, the loss of Hayden, our youngest son. But no matter whether it be the loss of a child, the loss of your finances, the loss of a job, the loss of your husband, the loss of your home, whatever that loss is, God has said that he is there with us. So in John 16:33, it says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world, you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. He's telling us that no matter what, you know, even though, you know, he has given us life through his death and resurrection, that we're going to have troubles in this world. But then not too far after that, in John 10:10, he's also saying that it is the thief that comes to steal, kill, and take from us. However, he has come that we may have life and have it abundantly. And so no matter the fact that we are going to struggle in this world, we're going to have these struggles and these losses, he has come to give us abundant life. And we can have that because of his death and resurrection. So first, we have to realize and recognize our losses. So whether that loss be from one of the things that I've mentioned, whether it be, you know, maybe your husband left after many years, and now you're trying to raise your children, or whether the person that was in your life that you thought was going to be there forever and they're now gone, maybe your best friend passed away. No matter what it is that you have that loss, maybe it's the loss of your innocence. You know, as a child, I lost my innocence at a young age, but I had to grow through that. And we have to recognize that each one of us has that loss. And as soon as we recognize what that loss is, then we can reflect on how the loss makes us feel. So when I am saying reflect on how the loss makes us feel, you know, we are allowed to grieve. And I think a lot of times we have to put on this face that we can't grieve, but we have to allow ourselves that feeling. And when you go through a loss like myself with Hayden and my son, there's so much in the grieving cycle. And a lot of people talk about these are the stages of grief. Well, I don't think that when we're going through stages, they have to all be in the same order. Some might be angry, some might be sad, some might be yearning, some might be holding back and putting themselves in a place where they don't have to deal with others. But no matter what, all of these stages of grief, we have to allow ourselves to feel that. We don't want to push it aside, because the more we push it aside, what happens is we get this root of sadness, which turns into a root of bitterness and won't allow us to bear the fruit that we are and that we've been given. And it won't allow us to thrive in that way. So when we're reflecting on how we lose and the things that we lose, we're allowing ourselves to grieve. We're allowing ourselves to cry. We're allowing ourselves to release all that is within us so that Jesus can pour more of him into us. So you see, it's a relieving, it's a getting rid of the things that are inside so that more of Jesus, more of his fruit can come within us. And that fruit is joy. That fruit is peace. That fruit is comfort. You know, when I was driving from one hospital to the next, when our son had been in the accident, and the one hospital had told us, you know, I'm not sure he's going to make it. And I'm like, whatever you can do, you know, let's do it. And so I'm driving over there, and I'm looking at my husband, and it was just the most odd thing. But I said, you know, no matter if Hayden makes it or if he doesn't, I really have a peace about this. I feel like God is just with us, and he's saying it's going to be okay. And my husband looked at me and he said that, he goes, you know what? I feel the exact same way. And we were able to feel this peace. And that's because we were also allowing ourselves to grieve. And so he's pouring more of himself into us when we're able to pour more of ourselves out. So after our son had passed away, our oldest son was the one that was struggling with the grieving process the most. And he was not talking. He was getting angry at school. He was losing friendships. And what I was seeing was that this child that's sitting beside me, that's still alive on this earth, I was losing him. And it was making me, like, I was just distraught. That was probably the hardest thing that I had to deal with during this time period. And so one day, I just walked up to him, and, you know, you've got to keep that open communication. And I went up to him and I said, you know, Hunter, you know, what's going on? How can I help you? And he's like, Mom, I just want to know that Hayden is in heaven. Like, that was his biggest concern, that Hayden was in heaven. And I said, you know, thank you for telling me this, because I want to pray with you on this. And so I was getting ready to pray with him. He's like, well, Mom, I actually had a dream about Hayden last night. He's like, and I saw Hayden, and I saw him on Streets of Gold. And I'm like, baby, I'm like, that was the best thing that you could have seen, because that was God's promise to you, that Hayden's in heaven. Because in Revelations, he tells us that we are going to walk on streets of gold. And he goes, I know, Mom. And you know, that son of mine who finally allowed himself to grieve, who allowed himself to cry, who allowed himself to communicate about the loss, found so much healing, and he's doing so well. So the next thing, after we've first recognized what our loss is, and then we reflected on our loss, we have to redefine that loss. And when we redefine our loss, what we're doing is we're redefining the loss into joy. And so how do you do that? You know, you're thinking, it's not, joy and happiness are not the exact same thing. Joy is being able to find hope when at the moment there seems like there is no hope. And that's the joy. It's like this exuberance that's coming from within you. It's a comfort. It's a peace. It's more than just happiness. It's seeing that you can still dream. That's joy. That's real and true joy. And so when we're redefining our loss into joy, what we do is we need to remember the good that has happened whenever that loss occurred. And so what we do when we're discussing the loss of our son is that we actually talk about the fun things that we did with him. We talk about his most silly moments. You know, every Christmas, no matter what, we want to remember that he was a part of our family. He was a part of our family unit. He was a part of our life. And so Christmas Eve morning, we go to Panera Bread, and we get a cinnamon roll because that was his favorite thing. And what we do is we each cut a piece of the cinnamon roll, and before we can take a piece of it and eat it, we have to say something that he did that made us laugh. And a lot of times my kids will be like, oh, his duck face. You know, it's just those things that make you laugh. My laughter is probably not what you want to hear about, but you know, he was the baby, and so he really got pushed along a lot by his siblings. And so just those things make us laugh. And then you need to redefine it, and that loss into joy. You also have to celebrate those times. So instead of celebrating the loss of Hayden, we celebrate his birthday and what a gift he was. So we still have birthday parties. And for a cake, we'll have a donut cake. I mean, do you know what a donut cake is? A bunch of donuts piled up, and then you put a candle on the top. And then we eat that together and we enjoy what he was. And this past year, we actually redesigned, we redid pictures that we had taken with him on our last trip with him to Disney. We went to Disney and we celebrated his birthday with doing pictures in the same thing that he was in, and so showing the growth from that time. That's how we redefine that joy, because when we redefine that loss into joy, it strengthens us for our future. It allows us to remember the good, but then also to build upon it so that we can dream forward. When we hold on to loss, we can grow that bitter root. But when we reflect on it as a joy, we can grow abundant fruit. So next, we have to realize the gifts that we still have. You know, if all I had done was felt that loss and just dwelled upon the loss instead of, you know, redirecting it and realizing that I still had an amazing family around me. I still had children around me that I loved and cared for, and I didn't want to lose them. You know, that's what I had to remember. I had to remember that I've gotten other gifts. There's amazing things that are happening. And to really realize those gifts, we have to be active. We can't forget that we have a life going on around us. We have to be able to walk, run, swim, play, whatever it is. We need to realize the gifts that God has given us. We need to be brave. We need to lean into the Lord. We don't need to turn away from him, because when we turn away from him, we don't have anywhere to go. But when we turn to him and we pray and remember that, we're realizing the gift that he has given us to comfort us, to hold us, to rock us, to care for us. We need to be active in our church, because that's a community that will wrap their arms around you. That's a gift, and we have to remember it as a gift. And we need to be creative. We need to be creative by journaling, by writing, by singing, by drawing. We really have to find how it is that we can realize the gifts that we've been given and use them to allow all of that loss to come out, to be filled with that joy. And then we can really thrive. You see, all of these things, whenever we are really wanting to thrive, we recognize our loss. We reflect on how the loss makes us feel. We redefine that loss into joy. We realize the gifts that we've been given. And then we thrive by giving to others. We thrive by going and seeing, you know, this is a loss that we have dealt with. How can we help others going through the same types of losses as us? Or maybe going through another loss. You know, that's how we really thrive. I remember after Hayden passed away, you know, we had worked through a lot of things. We had grieved a lot. But what I really wanted my family to do is to realize we're not the only ones going through something bad. We're not the only ones going through a circumstance that nobody else wants to go through. And so then I started looking for ways that we could give back. And that's when we were really thriving. That's when we were bearing the fruit that he has given us. And so we went out into the community and we started doing things for others that were struggling in another way. And that's when we began to fully thrive. So my friends, my sisters, my mothers that are out there, I know that each one of you has something that you're going through right now. Something that you're thinking, why can't God just take this away? Why me? Why this? And don't let that push you down. I want you to thrive. I want you to thrive in the abundant life that Jesus has for you. And so let's go through that. Let's recognize our losses. Let's reflect on how that loss makes us feel. Grieve. Let's redefine your loss into joy. And then let's realize the gifts that you have been given. And then you will really thrive. So what are some of the questions that you have right now? What are some of the things that you're really going through and you're like, how did you do this? Or how do you think you can get through this? Go ahead and just use your raise my hand feature, and you can either unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can type a question and Brittany will be able to type back to you. Either way, what is it that you are going through right now that you would really love some extra help on, or maybe just, someone just to listen to you? Go ahead. So while Brittany's going through some of those questions, I just wanted to encourage you in some other ways to kind of grow and to thrive in this life that that you have before you. And so I know that a lot of times when we're going through a loss, we tend to seclude ourselves from the others that are around us. Maybe it's our friends and family, and when we're going through those losses, we don't really know, what we're doing. We feel like nobody wants to be around us. But a lot of times we're putting up this barrier around us because we're so afraid of, one, either getting hurt again, two, of not being able to deal in the situation, or maybe we're thinking, well, I don't want anybody helping me. I feel like I need to help somebody else. But one of the greatest things that I had during that season of loss was that people would just show up at our home and just, be there when I first woke up, or, on my son's birthday, my oldest son's birthday, which happened to fall the day after our youngest passed away. They showed up with balloons and cakes, and we wanted to celebrate him. So we have a question right now, and it's, what would you say to someone who has lost several children through miscarriage? And what I would say is that one of the greatest reminders that God gave me through my own miscarriage is that he said, Kristen, I had a plan for that child. That child that you were carrying in your womb, I had a plan for them. And they fulfilled whatever that plan was. And so I know that it's difficult because we as people are really wanting to, and especially as moms, we're wanting to have that baby in our hands. We're wanting to hold that child. And we're never going to see that. But here, that's only here on this earth. Because I am positive that we're going to see that child again. So when I talk to my other children, because they were around when I've had this loss, and they're saying, Mom, will I ever get to see that sibling? And I tell them, you'll get to see them in heaven, because God promises us that all the children come to him. And so that's a child that's come to him. And I said, so let's name that child. And so I recommend, especially if you don't have anybody else to talk about this with, or it's just maybe you and your husband, I would say keep a journal of those children that you've lost, because I know that you consider it a miscarriage, but truly it's just another loss that you've had. That's a child. That's a child that you were given, and that's a gift that he gave you, and it's just you didn't get to see it here with you. So I would say, remember that God knows when, he formed that child in you. And he knows when that child was going to be born, and he knows when that child was going to die. But it's that time that you held on to that child within your womb, but it was a blessing. And so just remember that gift. Another question I have is, how do you help others who had loss from miscarriage and have no other children? And that's really what I was saying, is that when you have loss of and of a child, and you don't have other children, and that's an extremely difficult place to be in. But as a mom, because I want you to know, even if you've had miscarriages, you are still a mom. Those were babies that were yours, and that gave you that extra life. And so I would say to, as I was saying before, somehow be creative with it. Maybe you're not a writer. I tend to go to writing because if you saw my drawing, you'd be like, that's a stick figure. And I'm just being honest, I'm not the greatest drawer, but I love to write. But maybe you paint or something. Somehow in that, I want you to bring that baby to life in that area, because what you're doing is you're bringing that loss out. I want you to be open to talk about that with someone. If you don't feel like talking about it with a multitude of others, I want you to be able to talk about that with someone that you hold dear. And when you talk to them, I promise you that they want to just listen. So if they're not saying anything and they don't know what to say, just allow them to sit there and listen, because you need to get that out. You need to be able to express how you're feeling, because it hurts, and it hurts down deep. But you can still go and do and have that blessing of that baby. So find whatever you're creative in during that time period and do that. Maybe it's singing, maybe it's writing poetry, or maybe it's drawing. But whatever it is, find that groove and allow that to exemplify that baby that you had carried, that miscarriage that you had. Well, friends, I have truly enjoyed this time with you. I've enjoyed this time that we have been able to talk about thriving. And I know that I feel like it's so much short-lived, and I wish that I could have more time with you and go even deeper with the different things that we tend to go through when we're dealing with losses in our lives. But if you ever just want to, talk to me about it, or just get in touch with me and be able to talk about how you can deal with that loss, feel free to either email us at singlemoms@onemorechild.com, or you can reach out through Facebook or Instagram, any of these ways. I'd love to communicate with you. I'd love to feel like we can get together for tea or coffee and just be able to grow in the life that God has given us. Because one of the greatest things is when we're really thriving together, we're glorifying Him. We're glorifying Him, and others will see us, and they'll see that light, and they'll want that light, and they'll want to grow as well. And that's when we're thriving. That's when, as moms, we're truly, truly thriving. And you'll know it by the fruit that you're bearing. And so thank you for having us here today. Thank you for being with us at One More Child and this Thrive webinar series. I look forward to talking to you again soon.